It's a crossover edition of the show. Today, we bring in Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers to discuss the biggest Stanley Cup Final storylines for Edmonton, key players to watch, X factors, and ask the question, who will win the Stanley Cup?
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's very special crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Panthers. I'm Nick Zararis, host of Locked On Oilers. That is Armando Velez, the host of Locked On Panthers. Before we get to today's episode, it's brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Very straightforward episode today, folks. The big storylines, the key players, the stats you need to know, and series predictions. So, Armando, let's get straight down to it. What is the single biggest storyline for the Florida Panthers coming into their second straight Stanley Cup Final appearance?
It's this one word. It's redemption for the Florida Panthers. This time, for them, the final ending the way it did with the health for the Panthers. The Panthers wanted to make sure that they got more depth, and that they got a little bigger on their end too, with trading someone like Anthony Duclair and then using that money for an Evan Rodriguez, letting Radko Gudas walk, bringing someone like Oliver Ekman-Larsson to the mix, and also bringing someone like Dmitry Kulikov to hold the fort for the first 16 games. And as opposed to last year, the Panthers weren't really on their heels this year for them, although they struggled a little bit offensively with Ekblad and Montour coming back to the mix in mid-November. The Panthers have been really humming since, and this time around in the postseason for the Panthers, they're not facing as many shots against this time around. So it's not Sergei Bobrovsky carrying them to this part of the Stanley Cup Final, because he was the Conn Smythe leader going into the Stanley Cup Final last year. For the Panthers, they're not facing as many shots as the middle is for them tight. So it's a little bit of a different road for them. They never face elimination for them neither too. And obviously for the Panthers, the off the ice storylines is really the top four picks of the NHL entry draft, which was the first year of the current ownership for the Panthers in the Viola family. So a little bit of that storyline for them. And the Panthers, it's really all about continuing to put hockey on the map in South Florida and in the region too, as they're continuously trying to grow the sport. 26 years of not winning a round, and now you're 3 straight seasons at least in the second round and back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals.
They have done a really nice job of assembling a team that's multifaceted and able to win in a few different ways. You know, that was kind of what made Tampa Bay so well equipped for all of those years, was if you needed to outscore them, they have Stamkos, Kucherov, Point. If you need a goaltending battle, they've got Vasilevsky. Florida's the kind of the same boat now, where if you want to get into a shootout, it's Barkov, it's Verhaeghe, it's Kachuk. If you want a rock fight and you want to play defense and goaltending, we've got Bob and we've got Gus Forsling. If Florida is really well equipped for whatever type of game any of these games is going to take the shape of. For Edmonton, the off-ice stuff, it's real straightforward. Connor McDavid wants to be in that pantheon. The old heads will not give him the credit until he wins something. He doesn't even have like the gold medals that some of the other Canadians might be able to point to, because they haven't gone to the Olympics in so long. At least if he had a gold medal, he'd be like, all right, he's won something. He's got to get this for his... I don't care. I think he is the best hockey player I have ever seen. I'm only 27. I didn't see Gretzky. I didn't see Lemieux. Young Sid was close. This is the best hockey player I've ever seen. I don't care. He hasn't won anything. This is a team sport. This is the ultimate team sport. So as far as the big picture storyline, that's all the narratives. That is all the national media wants to talk about. Can McDavid anoint himself? Can he be this guy? Can he be the next in the line of the chosen ones? You know, you heard about Sid all those years in Rimouski, comes to the league, wins a cup within 3 years. The road for Connor and Edmonton's been a little bumpier, you know. Coming into this year, and I said this stat earlier today, and I'll reiterate it now, in the 18 years between their last Stanley Cup Final appearance and this year, so not including the 3 rounds they've won so far, they had won 4 playoff series in 17 years. If they were to win the Stanley Cup, they would match their total series wins for 17 years just this year. That's how different it is this year. And then as far as on ice, It's real simple. What do the Oilers do in the minutes McDavid and Draisaitl aren't on the ice? That is where these games are going to be won and lost because they've been so good in whatever round, whatever opponent, even against Vancouver, where there wasn't a lot of room, wasn't a lot of scoring opportunities. When McDavid and Draisaitl were out there, whether together or separate, they were able to control the game. When they weren't out there, Vancouver was in control of the game. So that's what makes it so interesting from a styles perspective, a matchup perspective, when you think about Edmonton versus Florida. Edmonton and Florida's got the guys to kind of hang around. Nobody's Connor McDavid. Sasha Barkov can be 90% of Connor McDavid, and that's enough to keep things close.
Yeah, no doubt. And for Barkov now winning his second Selke Trophy, and it's funny because now he's no more Lady Bings for Sasha Barkov. It's just Selke's for him, as he's also a little bit tougher, getting more hits on the body too. And it's funny because looking at McDavid's average time on ice, this is the second most average time on ice that he's second least, time on ice since his first full season in the NHL in 2017. So it's more quality over quantity for what McDavid's bringing on the ice when he is there too. So that's another thing. And this storyline also feels a little bit LeBron James-esque, wouldn't you say, with Gretzky, Michael Jordan, and LeBron and Connor McDavid too. So that's another thing when it comes to this storyline for McDavid trying to chase some GOAT status.
So one question for you before we move on to the next segment. Florida, obviously, like you mentioned in your opening salvo there, they were a fun team last year. They weren't expecting to get that far. They staved off elimination a couple of times. What would you say is the biggest on-ice difference this year versus last year? How did they get to this higher level of existence where they're not just hanging on, they're actively kicking butt now?
It's the high danger chances against for the opposition. That's really what it comes down to. And just quick outs for them. And also when it comes to just forechecking their opponents and creating that cycle game for them. And it's mostly about keeping the puck on their opponents. And I mean, they had a lot of trouble with the Boston Bruins. I mean, where the blue line is very similar to Florida's as far as strength too. So, I mean, peppering shots on Jeremy Swayman in that round. I mean, at times I felt like it was a lot of muffins for the Panthers too, but hey, they're able to get enough volume for them too. So that's another thing for the Panthers. It's really about just continuing to pepper more and more, get the forecheck going, overwhelm, tire them out. So, and there's also a psychological factor to what the Florida Panthers have done with their style of play too. That just throws the opposition out of sorts at times too. And it's really interesting to see what that's going to look like, especially with the bottom two pairs of the Edmonton Oilers and what they're bringing into this series.
Yeah, you brought it up. You took the words out of my mouth. I think that's the single biggest matchup issue the Oilers are going to have is once you get past that Ekholm and Bouchard pair, are they going to be able to get out of their zone easy enough? You know, the Panthers were more than content to bleed the Rangers out over 6 games by taking advantage of the Rangers' inability to clear the zone over and over again. And Edmonton, at times in these playoffs, when they've gotten into trouble, that's exactly what's happened to them. They have been hemmed in their own zone. The other team has cycled them and really made them play active defense. And that's not something Edmonton's defense, once you get past their first pair, is particularly good at. We'll see if Vincent Desharnais draws back in or if the Oilers stick with Philip Broberg, because that's worked well since the second-year defenseman drew in. But real quick, before we get out of here, for the next segment, the thing I'm most curious to see, I want to see how the Oilers react to outward physicality, because the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference play very different styles. The Rangers got their butts physically kicked for 6 straight games, and it wore them down. I don't think that Edmonton has been in a series like that yet this year. I think Dallas is a physical team, but Florida's on a different level because Florida's best players are also inherently physical guys too.
Yeah, no doubt, and physicality, but also on the other end, the Florida Panthers haven't dealt with the speed of Edmonton too, with the 2 best players on the planet, 2 top 5 players, however you rank Draisaitl in that top 5. That's all subjective for everyone else, but also how they're going to deal with the speed, especially when they're in the neutral zone and entering the zone, and how they pin them possibly to the half walls and force them to go east-west versus north-south too. That's another thing for them.
This should be awesome hockey. Armando and I will be right back after this, so stick around. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan sets you and your family up for success against the unknown. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you easily compare your options from all of America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, and even worse, if you switch jobs, it may not come with you. Policy Genius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over the other. You can trust their guidance. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance policy with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. I want to thank everybody who's making today's edition of Locked On Oilers or Locked On Panthers part of your Friday. It's nice the NHL gave us a full week to decompress. I know a lot of people have been complaining. When you're doing this every day, getting a little bit of room to catch your breath, it's very nice. Let's get to the fun stuff. There are stars all over the place in this series on both teams. I think we each highlight one star player and we highlight somebody a little bit more under the radar. I give you the opening shot.
Star player is going to be Sasha Barkov for the Panthers. I mean, the matchup against McDavid, but also I feel like also for the Panthers, whenever they're in the opponent zone too, Barkov's going to get his chances too. So I think that there's a big opportunity for Barkov also to counterattack McDavid, because you're not gonna stop him. You can only hope to contain him. That's really what it's going to be. So I'm not expecting 0 points I'm thinking that McDavid is going to average at least 1 to 1.25 points per game, somewhere in there. Maybe that's a little, maybe 1.5 for somewhere around there for him in this series, as he's chasing possibly getting 40 points since Gretzky and Lemieux. So that's another thing that he's chasing there. But it's going to be interesting to see how Sasha Barkov is going to matchup. But also for me, it's going to be Anton Lundell as far as like an under the radar type of player. I mean, he stepped up. I mean, in the last two series for the Panthers against the Bruins and the Rangers, I mean, Anton Lundell has ended with a bang in every single series in the last two series, for them, as far as driving play and creating a little bit off the rush with the screen, and also setting up Vladimir Tarasenko for that game winner against the Rangers in the last round too. So that's another thing for Lundell. I mean, that line, since it's been placed together. I mean, they're a +2 in goal differential at 5-on-5 too. They're controlling the play, getting it on their end, and also you're thinking of how they're going to match up with the Henriques, the Corey Perrys, the Evander Kanes, and also Sam Bennett brings that sandpaper, tough guy. He was a menace, especially in the Boston series, with creating enemies, and then also carrying that over to the Rangers series as he's also going back to Alberta, just like Matthew Tkachuk, facing off against an old rival.
Lundell is somebody who I saw it right away. You know, he got drafted and you saw the tools. It was very obvious that he was going to be something if he was given enough time. It's taken a little bit of time for him to kind of put it all together and get the right complementary pieces around him. But, you know, I was reading something a few weeks ago, and in the back of your mind, they're like, oh yeah, Florida's just making another Barkov in the lab right now. They got another Finnish dude who's just going to win every face-off and be in the right position. Every single time there's a loose puck, he's going to win every single loose puck. And he's got a little bit of offensive flair to his game, as you just mentioned. So for star player, Connor McDavid's the best hockey player on the planet. Nathan MacKinnon's going to win the Hart Trophy in a week or two, whatever. That's great. McDavid's playing out of his mind. You would say going into the Dallas series, he probably had left a little on the table. Vancouver had defended him really well. There wasn't a lot of offense. There wasn't a lot of opportunity. That's the one time this playoff you've seen an extended run of McDavid with Draisaitl was in the Vancouver series, because they just couldn't get anything going offensively. And for McDavid, it's real simple. He's the engine on the power play. The power play is going to be the difference for them. If they're going to win, the Oilers are going to need to continue being 30-35% on the man advantage. And that's against a Florida kill, which it was lights out. I mean, the Rangers went 3 games without a power play goal, and the Rangers have one of the best power plays in the entire NHL regular season or playoffs. So for star player, McDavid, obviously. And then someone a little under the radar, I would say Philip Broberg, but I'm not positive he's going to stay in the lineup. So I'll pivot and I will go with some combination of Connor Brown or Ryan McLeod or Corey Perry, whichever one of those three guys actually stays in the lineup, because there's been a little fluidity there. Same thing with Warren Fogle. The Oilers are going to need to goal someone in that bottom six. They are going to need somebody other than Leon, Connor, Nuge. They're going to need goals from somebody else in this lineup. They can do most of the heavy lifting. They can't do all of it. And you had mentioned Florida's depth is really solid. You know, their fourth line, even with Stenlund and Luosterainen, has been effective at points in these playoffs as well. So in comparison to Edmonton's, which just doesn't get a lot of ice time, you know, Janmark's line's getting 5-6 minutes a game. Florida's a little bit more at liberty to roll four lines, not evenly, but closer to even.
Yeah, for them, and just and managing the minutes for them too when it comes to that, so that you're able to get Barkov into like that 21 23 range for him too. So that's another thing. And also for, you mentioned Luosterainen, him and Stenlund are on that top PK unit, and they're going to be going against Connor McDavid, and then after that it's Sam Reinhart and Barkov, and one, even though Barkov gets all the praise for his defensive work, I say don't sleep on Sam Reinhart and what he can do defensively too. I know he has 57 goals in the regular season and 3 power play goals in the last series against the New York Rangers too. But what he can do on the penalty kill, those are going to be something that the Panthers are going to be eyeing on. And also, just how can you counter what the Oilers do on the man advantage too? Because for special teams on the PK side of things, only 3 power play goals against for the Oilers too. So the Panthers, they'll need to equal that that number that the Oilers have had through the first 3 rounds if they want even the slightest of chance to win. And also with the goaltending for Stuart Skinner versus Sergei Bobrovsky, the experience factor. I mean, the Panthers are facing 13 less shots per game going into the Stanley Cup Final this year versus last year. And I know things can be a little skewed with the 7 overtimes last year, especially the 4 overtime game in Carolina last season's, but it just goes to show that there's less of a workload for Sergei Bobrovsky going into this. So he's more rested. And I think this little bit of a long layoff, which honestly the 2 day gap in between the 2 cities, I actually like it. So for the players too, not for us content creators, but for the players. But Sergei Bobrovsky, he's rested, and I think he's really fit for something like this. But on the Edmonton Oilers side of things, 16 different goal scorers to Florida's 14. So that's something noteworthy too.
Yeah, definitely. Edmonton's gotten some weird ones. You know, Janmark got in there with a shorthanded goal. Ryan McLeod has a singular goal. It takes everybody this time of year. It really does, because the longer these games go, the less space there is. And in an ideal world, you know, you're gaming it out in your head. The star players more or less cancel each other out. And in that case, that would benefit Florida, because you get to that third, fourth line, second, third pair. Their depth is just a smidge better. Edmonton's star power, smidge better. At Florida's depth, a smidge better. The goaltending is probably the one real serious gap between these two teams. You mentioned the experience. Bob's got 2 Vezinas. He's a finalist again this year. He's one of the best, if not the best, of his era, against Stuart Skinner, who's got less than 200 career NHL starts. Somebody who at times has been the weak link for the team. But at the same time, when they really needed him to step up against the Stars, he was lights out in games 5 and 6. And Dallas is a good team. I know Dallas didn't look as good as maybe they had in the regular season. Some guys dealing with some injuries, guys dinged up, but everybody's hurt this time of year. It's horrifying to see the injury reports as teams start to trickle out. One last thing, as far as matchups, key players, I'm very excited to see if Draisaitl and Tkachuk are still at each other's throats or not. It'll be very fun to realize, and we'll know real quick, because I think that first game, it goes one of 2 ways. It's either absolute chaos, or it's 2 teams cautiously feeling each other out, not wanting to make a mistake. I don't think Matthew Tkachuk strikes me as the type of person who's patient.
Yeah, and just going back to an iconic quote that he had when he first got traded to the Panthers, I still hate Edmonton, but I hate Tampa more. So I think he's definitely driven by the opportunity to go against the Edmonton Oilers again, especially with how that series when he was with the Flames ended in 2022, which I mean, even Calgary Flames fans have a lot to say about Tkachuk, about quitting, not being a playoff performer, you name it. I mean, so Tkachuk is definitely someone who hasn't taken over, even though he's leading the Panthers in points, but he hasn't had that takeover mode for them. But also, Tkachuk going into the season says if his defensive metrics are better, but his points are down, then he's satisfied with the result that he has. And honestly, when that line of him, Bennett, and Rodriguez have been on the ice, the puck, the possession metrics has also favored them too. So that's another thing of what Matthew Tkachuk is hopefully going to bring to the table. And for him, we're just waiting for that takeover for him. And what better opportunity for him than his former rival in the Oilers.
That's a gnarly line, man. Those guys will pummel you between Tkachuk and Rodriguez. That's a really gnarly group. Mm-hmm. Armando and I are going to take one more quick break. After that, we're going to tackle the notable stats, X factors, and give you our official series predictions. So please stick around.
But first, we're going to tell you guys all about Game Time. And Game Time makes getting NBA and Stanley Cup Final tickets even easier and faster. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and view from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA and NHL tickets. With last-minute deals, you could save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concert, comedy, theater, and more. Save even more when you choose the section and let Game Time choose the seat. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
This is what it's all about, man. Best of 7. And legitimately, these are the two best teams. I don't think anybody in the East could have beaten Florida, even fully healthy. The closest team was the Rangers, and the Rangers very quickly wilted the longer that series went along. Edmonton, if you want to argue they got a little bit of an easier path, they didn't have to play Vegas or Colorado, sure, but they beat Dallas, who beat both of those teams. So at the same time, let's give credit where it's due. All right, give me one stat you really want to talk about.
I want to talk about penalty discrepancy for the Oilers versus the Panthers, because the Panthers were +9 in power play opportunities to PK against, while Edmonton was +2. So that's another thing of how the Panthers have used their forecheck style to draw hookings, holds, and et cetera to that. But how are you when you hear that stat? What goes through your mind?
I know Florida's gimmick. Florida loves to play physical and dare the referees to call things. And the referees are not going to start a parade to the penalty box because they don't want to decide the games. They would rather let it go. And as long as we're consistent about that, I have no problem with that. I don't think that helps the Oilers. If anything, I think that type of game state inherently favors Florida because Florida wants to cycle. They want a forecheck. But as long as we're consistent about letting soft stuff go, that's fine with me. As long as we're calling it consistently, that's all I ask.
Yeah, and I'm looking like 5-on-5 for the Panthers, which it's been a great thing for them all postseason long. +7 in goals for them, while Edmonton is +1. So I'm interested to see how the 5-on-5 battle is going to be with just when you look at Edmonton, just their power play with Zach Hyman being on the net front too, and just all the high danger chances. Leon Draisaitl on the right side with those one-timers for them, but. It's going to be really crucial for the guys like an Aaron Ekblad, who's going to need to have his best series of his life for him. And honestly, that goal is that Connor McDavid scored in the Game 6 against Dallas is going to continue to be spoken all around the hockey world. And I know Heiskanen's a left-handed shot. With hopefully Ekblad, him being a right-handed shot. I know Tanev was in the box, so hopefully we don't see any of that for Aaron Ekblad. But he's going to have the series of his life. Ekblad and Forsling for him of how they control gaps, pin McDavid to the half wall, and also clear those backdoor feeds too, because we know McDavid is the best of the best when it comes to making other guys better on the ice.
Yeah, the thing about the Oilers' power play that makes it so good is the fact they don't have like a set quarterback. It's that their power play is McDavid skating in circles until a play develops around him. And that's really difficult on defenses because most defenses, you're able to kind of hone in on the point guy because typically the power play runs through a quarterback. It's somebody, typically a defenseman at the top of the zone who the play runs through. But when the fulcrum point of the power play can be behind the net, it makes it a little bit more difficult. My stat for you, when McDavid and Bouchard are on the ice together, Edmonton have scored 71% of the goals. When they are not on the ice, Edmonton has scored 36% of the goals. I think that's the most telling stat there is. The Oilers love to load up, where if McDavid's out there, they do everything they can to get Bouchard out there with him as well. I'll be curious to see how often that's the case in Florida, especially not having last change. I'll be curious to see if Edmonton is struggling to get their offense going, if we see McDavid and Draisaitl together. And then when they do that, that typically changes who they play on the wing, because they'll bump someone up to balance out their lineup a little bit better. But if they can't get those two lines going separately of each other, they typically put them two together and say, we'll figure out the rest. I don't know how pragmatic that is against a Florida team that's deep and frankly has the ability to match close enough. And then my X factor, it's Evan Bouchard. Edmonton being this good this year is entirely the fact that him and Ekholm have been the best or second best defensive pair in the entire playoffs. This is not Darnell Nurse. This is not Duncan Keith. This is not Tyson Barrie, any of the long list of first pair defensemen they've tried to run the offense through. Evan Bouchard is legitimately one of the 5-10 best D in the world, and it's why they're here. Who's Florida's X factor?
I think for Florida, it's going to be It's going to be Sergei Bobrovsky for the Panthers, because I mean, he hasn't had, just like how Matthew Tkachuk hasn't had that takeover series, that we haven't seen that from Sergei Bobrovsky neither. But like I said, the high danger chances are going to be the highest they've ever been throughout the playoffs that the Panthers have faced. So it's going to be, can Bob be ready for that, for when McDavid is getting into the below the hash marks too, and into the blue paint. So that's going to be another thing for them, and also for the Panthers. Another once again, Sam Reinhart, how he's gonna be defended in the bumper position, how the Panthers are gonna feed him too. So that's another thing as far as like being hopefully a difference maker for the Panthers there. So that's another one. And also Carter Hagee. I'm not necessarily worried about him, but he's come clutch multiple times. Can that clutch gene for him come up once again, as he has 5 overtime winners in his career, just third all time for in postseason history. So that's another thing of how when it's crunch time, who are you going to get to the puck to if you're the Florida Panthers? Because there's various options. Barkov's not necessarily going to get the points for him, but he's going to find a way to get the pucks to his teammates. And the thing is, with style of play for Barkov versus McDavid, is you don't need to necessarily build your style completely around Barkov, but with McDavid and his speed, everything needs to just be built around them. So it's so different with how these two teams are built. So it's going to make for an exciting series.
This isn't going to be a very surprising answer, but I do need your official series prediction.
When it comes to the Florida Panthers and just their mission to get here and everything that they've worked all offseason for, and just the story going into the postseason, you think of redemption for them, and you think of what kind of class Barkov could be in if he does win a Stanley Cup as the Selke Trophy winner, with the guys like Bergeron, O'Reilly, Taves, Pavel Datsyuk, Rod Brind'Amour. He has a chance to really implement his legacy into the NHL, along with Bob being a 2-time Vezina Trophy winner too, and also the guys who have been there in the Aaron Ekblads too from the start. Dmitry Kulikov too, even though he left and then came back, former Oiler Dmitry Kulikov. But I just think for the Panthers, it's for them to finally finish that redemption story and finally bring home their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. So I'm going to say Panthers in 6.
6 is probably the right number. I was talking about this with Hunter earlier today, that the last 10 years or so, the team that wins the cup has kind of just blown the doors off of the other team as it's gone along. There's been quite a few 5 and 6 gamers in there. So stupidly, I'm going to pick the Oilers in 7. I think the Oilers' high-end talent is enough, and I said this earlier today on Locked On NHL with Hunter, and I'll repeat it again. McDavid doesn't know if he's ever getting back here again. This might be the one chance he ever gets. And when the man plays like he can, there's nothing anyone can do to stop him. So that might be a little bit more feel than logic. I think Florida is a little bit of a deeper team. I think Bob is clearly a better goaltender, but Edmonton Stars have continued to deliver. I mean, they have the leading point, the first 4 guys for points in the playoffs are all Oilers. So I think the Oilers' high-end talent is just enough to squeak it out. I think this is going to be an awesome series. I hope it goes 6 or 7 games. We deserve. I do not want it to be the offseason already. I don't care about the draft. I don't care about free agents. I just want to watch hockey. Please. 7 games, 8 overtimes across 7 games. Let's get nuts, please.
Yeah, and for the Panthers, they've lost already a lot from their previous Stanley Cup run, even though they got better. But with what's coming in free agency and who you have to try to re-sign and being back, it was harder already to get here. And for the Panthers, if it doesn't happen again, I mean, it's going to be for a long summer for them once again, too. And that's why for them, it's right now they feel like they need to take advantage of it for them because the bill will come due. Just ask the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, man, that's the thing. Everybody loves to say, oh, they're a good team. They'll be back. They'll be back. Most famous last words in all of professional sports. The Sharks loaded up, traded for Erik Karlsson in his prime. They got to 1 conference finals, and then it fell apart. You get 1 or 2 cracks at this, maybe a decade. And that's a good decade. You get to the final maybe once if you're having a good decade.
Yeah.
But that will just about do it for this very special crossover edition. Thank you to Armando. Thank you to the listeners of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Oilers. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. Let us know who wins the series, how many games, who's the Conn Smythe winner. We will talk to you guys real soon. Enjoy the Stanley Cup Finals, everyone.